Good morning, everybody. This is Walk the Dog Season 2, Episode 12. And it is Friday morning. Kids are at school. Wife is getting cake supplies because she's baking the cake for niece's birthday party. And I'm waiting for morning playtest time. So, yeah, had some time to record this. I've played enough ranked games on live. I played a bunch last night. I'm at 200 LP right now. So definitely getting pretty familiar with the meta. What I will say is NA players at that elo do not know how to play the game. The number of players trying to hard force the TFT Academy comps and going 8th is something. I am enjoying the free top 4s. I'm getting a lot of 3rds. I think the only games I'm failing are the ones where I try to do something really silly, like I took Zaheen Augment, which for some reason I got offered it 3 times last night. Lucky me. 2 of them I top forward, totally fine. One of them though I just completely whiffed. I did not hit Xinjiao 3 until 5-1. So I win 8th that game. I deserved that 8th. But yeah, overall, my wins have actually been with Yordle. Using Yordle, getting 8 Yordle online really early, econing, actually off of Teemo, into the late game Ziggs and Fizz, but like, when I say late game, I mean like 6-2 the Ziggs comes online. This isn't like a Ziggs comp. And then one of them I actually hit a Swain 3. And then the other game I won was a Baron game, almost lost to a Ryze comp that didn't have Ziggs, but then hit Kaisa 3 and Rift Herald 3. So, yeah. But overall, what I will say is so far at least, I am personally enjoying this meta a lot more. But that's because the current S tier comp isn't forceable without being punished, right? If you compare it to, like, if you compare Ziggs Ryze, your early game can get punished. Whereas if you compare Caitlyn, it's like, well, your early game is full loss streak, and then, you know, you hit, and then you have like 40 health with a T-Hex 1 and you stabilize, and there's nothing you can do about it. So I will say I am personally enjoying this meta so far better, but it's early, right? I mean, what I will say is Diana got replaced by Fizz, and I know a lot of people don't like Fizz. Now, that at least, though, what I will say is during development, that was always the plan, right? We wanted people mad at Fizz. So that part's good. We're hitting our design goals. People are mad at Fizz. Good job. But what I'll also say is, from what I can tell, Bilgewater is like just as good, if not better. And so the fact that like Bilgewater is the S tier comp while also has Fizz is a little scary. But yeah, like I know Ryze Ziggs is the new hotness, but I would guess in tournaments starting today, I know EU's playing right now. I haven't watched much yet. I imagine we're going to see a lot more Bilgewater and Ziggs Ryze being forced, but we'll see. Certainly, from my experience with Ziggs, what I messed around with, and I haven't even looked this up yet, so if you want to look this up, you can look this up and see if I'm right or wrong. But my guess is a lot of his LP delta on items is going to be things that are attack speed based. Like Shojin will probably be bad on him, and things like Quicksilver are going to be quite good on him. Because from what I can tell, a lot of his power is in his auto attacks, actually, not his spell. His spell's like a nice bonus for sure, and it does damage, don't get me wrong. But that auto attack actually like can skip the tank, get to the back line, and do some pretty big work, is my guess. But I could be wrong. It could just be OP. But my read on him has been that the buff to the bounces on that part of the spell might have been the miss. But yeah, we'll see. Monday morning meta report in a couple days, so I'll deep dive then. What I will also say though is that like my workload, like I said yesterday, I got a lot of my workload. I know what I'm doing for the next 3 weeks. Some big projects. One I was able to sneak and get done quickly, but a couple others that's going to eat a lot of my time that I can't really focus on live. Like if I play live, it'll distract me, and a lot of the work I need to do, I need to like sit and focus for multiple hours. So gonna have to like finish, like I kind of am going to use this weekend to maybe grind a bunch of ranked games in between the birthday party and stuff like that. And then that might be the end of my ranked climb for at least for a while. So yeah, we'll see. Hopefully though, when I'm in LA, so next week I'm still here. Week after that, I'll be in LA for 2 weeks. So these videos will also be from the Riot campus and stuff like that. But hopefully during that time, maybe in the evenings, since I won't have family to do family stuff with, I can sneak a few games in and stuff like that and keep climbing. So yeah, which actually leads me to the first question. The first question someone asked is, you always talk about like, hey, it would be better to ask this person, on your team or whatever. Would you ever have guests on Walk the Dog? The answer to this is probably not, but I'm open to it. Obviously, having guests on Walk the Dog when I'm here is like impossible. A lot of the times these are also off the cuff. But I say I'm open to it. And if any of my team is listening to this and wants to, I'm in LA those 2 weeks. If a coworker of mine wants to come in and record one of these with me, I am happy to take this mic and hand it back and forth and have a conversation. And that's the one thing is my setup is I have one mic. I don't have a fancy setup where I can do 2 mics. But I'm open to it. And so, yeah, if any of my coworkers are like, hey, I heard you were doing a Walk the Dog episode at work and I'm happy to join you, I'm down to do that. But it's really a practicality thing. I will say at least one of my coworkers was like, we should just start a podcast. And I was like, that'd be kind of fun. But there are a lot of podcasts nowadays, so I don't know, but that would be cool. There you go. I mean, I will say, don't talk if you don't know. I missed that. That was a good TFT podcast, but So anyway, yeah, I'd be open to it, but it is unlikely. So, all right. Next question was, what is the purpose? So we just nerfed Tryndamere, and Tryndamere was a scaling champion. What is the purpose of low-cost champions? I thought low-cost champions were meant to transition into the late game, but if you have a low-cost scaling champion, then you never transition. So what's the point? And this is a fair question. And if you think about standard TFT, you're absolutely right? Standard TFT is buy your 1 cost and your 2 costs, then hit some 3 costs, transition into those, then hit some 4 costs, transition into those, then hit some 5 costs, transition into those, and then your late game board is a bunch of 5 costs. That is what I would call standard TFT, right? However, one of the things that both augments do and some champ designs do is try to create alternate experiences that you can have that are different from standard TFT. And those alternate experiences provide novel, unique things that you've never done before, right? An example of this is Built Different, right? The augment that says play with no traits active, right? That is a different experience because normally you're trying to maximize your traits, but instead you're not, right? Now, granted, that gets solved into everyone goes, well, here's the built diff comp you should play. But again, the design philosophy is still true, which is we're trying to create a new experience for you. Another example of this is Cruel Pact, right? Like Cruel Pact is a different experience where it's like, what if you had a game where you start at level 7, but you got to win and play tempo, and otherwise you're going to lose all your health. Like that's a different experience. And having those alternate experiences is good. One of the alternate experiences we've had that was really good, I always go back to, was Set 9 Cho'Gath. I think it was Set 9. Set 9 Cho'Gath was the one cost where he would eat and gain health and stack and become this late game monster. And that was a different experience than you normally have, where instead of transitioning to the late game units, you have this one cost that you're very, very invested in. And that worked out really, really well. Players had a lot of fun with that Cho'Gath. It is widely considered one of our best units of all time. That was a great experience. And so every set, I will say, we try to find a stacking experience like that because that was good for TFT, and having that unique experience was a positive. But what I will also say is a lot of the attempts that we've tried this are generally just less satisfaction, right? Like Cho'Gath gained health and size, right? And so you could literally see him gain this big, big health bar. And Scion's kind of this, right? Scion on Live is basically this, but like they get bigger in size, they get bigger in health bar. Cho'Gath was especially cool because like as that health bar got bigger, he also did more damage. So you would just like late game have this really cool scaling fantasy that was satisfying and just all around great. Well, then we tried stuff like Shaco and Yasuo, who scaled also, but the only thing they scaled was AD or attack speed. And you can do this, and it's technically functionally the same, but it's not as satisfying, right? Like seeing your Shaco go from 50 AD to 80 AD, you barely notice it. It's like, yep, the crits went from 1900 to 2200. Cool, right? Not really that interesting. I think even Tryndamere was kind of the same. Like Tryndamere was a beast and he was, overpowered and whatever. But like, did you really feel the difference between a 60 AD Tryndamere and a 90 AD Tryndamere or 140 AD Tryndamere? Not really, because generally they were all kind of the same, which was like, oh yeah, it's just the win streak Tryndamere that has a bunch of stacks. So overall, I have not been as particularly impressed with the non-HP scaling low-cost experience. I think that's actually provided better on the augment that gives you the Death Cap or Death Blade that you stack up. I've had fun with that one. I had my Death Cap at 140 AP one game. That was a lot of fun. And at least that one you can put on any champion, and so you get like this unique experience that you can tailor make, whereas if it's literally tied to just Shaco or Yasuo, that's just like all you can do. I think of those two, Yasuo was the better one, but they all still pale in comparison to the original, which was Cho'Gath. But that is kind of like the purpose of them, right? The purpose is to create this alternate experience that is slightly different than normal TFT, but still something fun. And a lot of our players like that experience, and so we try to offer that to them. Now, part of that is to make sure they're viable, right? Like Sion is a good example. I think a lot of players at low elo love playing Sion. The Bard Sion comp is actually pretty good at low elo. High elo, though, it is unfortunately not very effective. And this set in particular, unfortunately, Zilean exists. And so late game, you always like, you build up this Scion. I've seen like 13,000 health Scions that people have built up. They're really, really fun. And then a Zilean bomb completely counters you. The worst is when you get like the Talisman Scions I've seen. I saw a double Talisman Scion that was like, oh, that's so cool. 40,000 HP, and then Scion bomb or Zilean bomb kills you. So that has left that not quite as satisfying. Whereas I think when Cho'Gath got out of control, it was like, there's nothing I can do, But obviously balancing that is always a challenge. But anyway, that is kind of the purpose of low-cost scaling champions. So, yeah. All right. Next question is, a couple of times I've mentioned that I am sort of like the encyclopedia of TFT knowledge for the team. And so the person actually asked, how much of old TFT do you think you could recite off the top of your head? The answer to this one is actually kind of funny, because I think if you put me in a situation where you're like, here's a quiz show, answer questions about like set 1 or set 2 or stuff like that, I don't even know if I'm the best on the team. And in fact, the one time we did something similar to that, there was that silly game show that Witty and Kent and I went on where they quizzed us about TFT, and Kent ended up winning. Because Kent actually had, well, I'll tease and say it was because Kent got asked a lot of the questions about things that he literally worked on, so he remembered them, whereas I was like, I got harder questions. Witty generally has a better knowledge of like set 1 through 3 than me a lot of the times. He'll remember the details, or he'll bring up stuff like Druid. I'm like, oh yeah, Druid existed. That's true. So if the test was more how well could you do on a quiz like this? Not really that great at first. My memory sort of works, hilariously enough, like an encyclopedia. You kind of have to look it up first. So let's use the Druid example. If someone came to me and they were like, Mort, do you remember Druid? Oh yeah, I remember Druid. What can you tell me about Druid? How did players like it? How did that work out? And I can go, well, the problem with Druid was it was an early game comp only. Like you would play it in the early game because that health regen was really good, but the health is flat health regen, which falls off a cliff. And so by stage 3, Druid lost all of its effect. And so it became this weird trait that just exists by itself where, you can only play it in stage 2 and that's it. It had no fantasy. It was kind of awkward. And it being tied to low units just meant it was like, you almost had like 3 champions in the set who just didn't have an origin or a class or whatever, which, you know, has its pros and cons. Like, that's the kind of thing people will come to me for, because I can remember a lot about like how players experienced it, how it worked, you know, relative to what was in the set at the time. Then combine that with all of our modern learnings and goes, here's what I would make that true, right? It's like, it's not just the like textbook knowledge, because people have websites for that, right? If people were like, do you remember how much HP regen Druid was? I would say like, I think it was like 40 per 2 seconds, but like, I don't know. I don't remember off the top of my head. You'd have to look that up. But we have websites for that, right? Like between all the wikis and meta TFTs and whatevers, there's ways you can look that up. That's not what I'm useful for. It's the contextual knowledge of the player experience and the systems that work together. That's where I come in. And like I said, Druid was literally just an example I pulled out of my butt here. I didn't pre-plan Druid. You know, if I'm making up another one here, like Dawnbringer, what was good and bad about Dawnbringer? You know, and I can go, oh, well, the problem was the heal, because it took time, could sometimes get overdone. And then to fix that, we had to give it an Edge of Night effect, which ended up being really weird. Also, the fact it was this vertical, that there was so much power in the verticals, meant everyone was just playing buy all the blue units, which wasn't very interesting team building and led to a really basic experience. Things like that. And, you know, so that's how my brain kind of operates, is the ability to pull out that knowledge and recall what it was like for players at the time, the lessons we learned at the time, and the things that we should take away to make the game better so that we don't repeat the same mistakes. That's what I mean by the encyclopedia. So yeah, if you want to do a TFT quiz though, who knows? Maybe Froden or Kent or someone else can beat me at that for sure, because on the spot I tend to blank sometimes. So yeah. All right, last question I had, because there weren't a ton of questions. Can you talk about the process for designing the Bilgewater shop and what went into that? And this is another one where if you asked Ryan or Julian, they could probably give you a more in-depth answer. Props to Ryan, who was the one who put it all together. But the TLDR is, very early on, we knew that Bilgewater, I think it was Witty, Giovanni, and I doing the initial design for the set, and we had talked about having this alternate shop that you could use to buy Bilgewater items. Like, that was the initial core. And then we were like, well, it can't just be Bilgewater items, because originally it started off as like, every set we have like an item trait, things like Ink Shadow and whatever the set 14 one was called. I can't remember here's the memory thing, but the Zeri one that was like project skins. Anyway, it was the item trait of the set. You use Bilgewater shop to buy items. But then we're like, well, it can't just be items, because then that's not a very interesting shop. So you could buy other things like consumables or stats for the trait that then came up, or units in the shop. And it was like, oh, this starts to be really cool, where there's just a bunch of things you can offer. Great, that's a neat idea. We can work with that. Then I believe Tim worked with Ryan to figure out sort of a framework of like, okay, if you have 3 Bilgewater in, you get 1 gold of value of drip econ worth of units. So if 3 Bilgewater is giving you 15 serpents, then 15 serpents is how much a 1 cost costs, which was a Lowy, right? And so that's why the like initial version was like 15, 30, 45, and then I believe he went 75, 100 just because 4 and 5 costs are more valuable. But that was like the initial framework. Then from there, we filled it out with stuff. We originally had, the team made a bunch of items. Some of them were good, some of them weren't, is what I'll tell you. And we had to iterate on those items a couple times. The stats themselves, initial version actually was just like, you could buy HP and it never went up in cost. And what I will tell you is some of our early playtests with Bilgewater had situations where like players were just buying stats. And by the end of the game, your Bilgewater trait was giving you 130% HP, 180% AD and AP. It was like way, way over budget for the power of a trait because you were just buying stats all the time. And it was like, okay, well, we can't do this. And buying stats is also really boring. If the only thing you're buying is like my trait, it just felt like a scaling trait, which was not very interesting. So that was when I came in and applied some of my systems knowledge, and that's where I added things like things scaling costs the more of them you buy, so that you're incentivized to spread the knowledge, right? But like champs was the one thing where we're like, look, if you're buying champs, it's sort of there to either accelerate your champ power or just get rid of your serpents you don't want for gold. And we didn't want to punish you because you were on your third Twisted Fate that now it costs 60 gold. So champions were sort of the stable, they always cost the same. And then stats was the kind of thing where it's like, if you go higher up, you get more efficient gold values at your first purchase, but they still scale up. Items, very similar. And then we worked from there. Now, I'll also tell you, at one point, we actually did have 2-star and 3-star units available for purchase, but that we found, made the thing a little bit more complicated. It also led to situations where like your shop would have 1-star Alawi and 2-star Alawi in it, and you're like, no, but seriously, I don't want Alawi. Stop it. But then it would also lead to some pretty quick acceleration. It led to Bilgewater feeling like a reroll comp. And again, a lot of our early playtests were like, you were having 3-star Bilgewater units and buying stats. And for something that started off as the item trait, that seemed like a pretty big miss. And so we had to keep iterating so that items were a little cheaper, stats were a little more expensive in scaling. We got rid of the 2-star units, things like that. Then the only other hard part from there that's worth talking about is the UX itself. Our UX designer did an initial pass, got things in there. And then from there, I provided some input of like, change the close button here. We don't need to see this value here, like simplifying it down to what it is now. A lot of details of like, hey, this button should be bigger, or this X button doesn't need to be exactly here. It could be over here. Little nitpicky things like that to help improve the UX of the Bilgewater shop. Then we just had like rules. Ryan did a really good job working with the team on rules of like, well, what happens if you have the Bilgewater shop when you head to the carousel? All those like bugs that you have to deal with when you're developing things like that. And that being said, what I'll say is like, what we've ended up with is something that I think is relatively balanced, other than Bilgewater being too strong, but it's actually so deep that even our best players are still arguing about the best way to play Bilgewater, which is kind of awesome because it means we've made this like thing that you can get into pretty easily, right? It's like open a shop and buy things, great. But it's actually so deep that the debate of how to play it is really, really interesting. Initially everyone was doing the save all your serpent shards till 7, then buy a bunch of items. And then it became a tempo thing around graves. And then it became buy all the stats you can. Like, I think if you ask 3 different challengers how to play Bilge, they'll tell you a different answer, which is really cool. If I have one regret, it's that certain things in the shop are limited to certain heights. So for example, if you really want a captain's brew, you have to be exactly 5 Bilgewater, which means if you ever go to 7 Bilgewater, like let's say you high roll and hit 7 early, the brew will never, ever, ever appear. So you have to like toggle back to 5. I think that's incorrect. I think anything that was available at like 3 and 5 should have been available. But the trick there, though, is that like the reason we didn't do it that way is because let's say you're 7 and then you refresh your shop and all you're seeing is the same things you saw at 3 and 5. That feels bad, right? We like really wanted to have this clear, like, I get to 7, I get to see the cool new things. But the trade-off there has been that in order to go back, if you're like a pro who's really trying to optimize it, then the toggling exists. And so that is one of those things that I don't think we've solved at a trade-off level. But again, gun to my head, if I had to make the call today, I actually think we made the right call for most of our players. Most of our players play Bilgewater, buy the things, upgrade it, get cooler things. That generally works for most people. And our absolute apex pro players, they're fine learning how to toggle and figuring all that stuff out and exploring that. And I don't think that's harmful. So, yeah. Cool. All right. How long is this? I don't know if I went short or long today. 24. Oh, that's not bad. This is a normal episode length. So, cool. I will end it here. It's Friday. Gonna go answer some Slack messages, get ready for playtest, couple one-on-ones, and then dive into some work, and then the weekend. So should be good. All right. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the meta. Watch the tournament. Don't worry. There's no shortage of people DMing me going, why haven't you hotfixed Ziggs already? Which is hilarious. But again, at the same time, what I will tell you is there are lots of things you can play. Use them to climb. Demacia is really good. So, okay, cool. That's going to do it for me. Happy Friday. Hope you guys enjoy. Until next time, take it easy.